All right. I'm excited to have Christopher Salem here on the show today. Thank you for taking time out of your day. I know everybody's time is of a priority, but um, yeah, I'm looking forward to our conversation today. So you have such a unique background in that you have your own company, Empowered Fathers in Action Inc., and we'll talk about that. But you're a business executive mentor. You run your own successful business, but you're also, and I love the phrase, you're a business acceleration strategist. And not only that, but I love the fact that you're talking about earlier about how you work to help people create sustainable business. And that's not something we really hear in today's world because we're very much, I feel like it's dying a little bit, but we're still very much in the hustle and grind. Especially every time I deal with somebody who's a founder, they if they're working 80 hours a week, that's a part-time job in the founder space. So let's talk about that a little bit. What do you mean when you talk about sustainable success as a business owner?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Travis, for asking. Sustainable success, it doesn't mean that, hey, when you get to that level, everything is going to go right and you're going to have success each and every day. No, part of success is also experiencing the setbacks, the challenges, when things don't go right or something doesn't work out. See, we can't become more innovative and creative if we're not experiencing challenges or setbacks. Only things that we can only create better things from challenges. So sustainable success is about less being attached to the expectation to the outcome or the outcome itself. It's about embracing the process. That
Hmm.
the process of success is always going to have its ups and downs. It's how we think differently to look at the downside not as a downside but as something that is good, even though it may not look like that at the time. It's one of the things that is necessary so that we can now learn to not become complacent,
Hmm.
bored, and that we're always again on our toes, making sure we're proactive to make improvements, continuous improvements in the areas that we can provide value and impact to the clients, customers, patients, whatever business that you're in that you serve.
Yeah, I love that. I love the fact you say being sustainable doesn't mean you're not going to have setbacks. But I like just the word sustainable, right? I think, especially again, the work that I do, I talk to a lot of people that are just burned out, right? Because they follow a specific business model, not asking the question of, is this business model right for me? Is my personality type? But so you get caught up in the like, oh, how do you be successful? Hustle, 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 grind, 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 work more. And if you're not working 80 hours a week, right, you're not doing the job correctly. And some people that works great for. Yeah, Schwarzenegger famously only slept 5 hours a day, right? And he just said that. He's like, I just naturally wake up after 5 hours. So for him, that's easy. Some people, need the 8 to 9 hours sleep. And so if you're trying to live like Schwarzenegger, you're gonna burn out really quick. So what was it over the course of your career that helped you develop those strategies around sustainability, especially as it comes to business growth? Because I think the perception is that if you're going to have a business that's rapidly growing, scaling, there isn't going to be any balance or sustainability in it. It's all just going to be, you know, hope that you can hang on until you reach whatever that is, the exit or the team or the
Yeah.
certain size.
Yeah, so what it had to start with, I had to learn a couple of things. I had to learn how to focus on what I can control and what I can't control. See, if I
Mm,
get caught up in the things I can't control, then I'm always going to be operating in a reaction point of view. I'm going to be reacting to when things don't go right or things don't turn out the way I would like to, see them. So I had to change my thinking to focus on what I can control. And what I can control is me. I can't control other people or situations, but I can control the things I can within myself. And that is the communication to myself and others and learning how to be more assertive rather than passive aggressive. So this way, whether if I'm the sender and or the receiver of the communication, I'm responsible to make sure that I'm specific, clear, and concise. So
mm,
this way, there's less room for assumption and speculation with other people for expectations to fall through the cracks. I can't just expect that someone else is going to do it just like I'm going to do it. I can't control what they're going to do or what their perception is of what I communicated to them. I also got to control my behavior to make sure that it's in alignment with my communication. If I say something and then my behavior contradicts what I said, well, guess what? That's not going to resonate with certain people. And these are the very things that can work against me.
Mm,
It's my attitude I can control. It's happening for me, not to me. If it's happening to me, I'm the victim. I'm using excuses. I'm pointing the finger at other things to deflect what is going on onto other people and situations. That doesn't work. I see it happening for me. I embrace the challenge. I welcome it to learn and grow and seek sustainability in that in terms of whatever success that is in my business and
mm,
personally at my personal side as well. Then it's my emotions and how I respond versus react. Negative emotions are not a bad thing. Matter of fact, they're a good thing. They are messages to let you know that something is unresolved. So instead of reacting from it, now I can choose to find out what can I do to make it better and
mm,
now respond rather than react from a secondary emotion. So this way I'm not, further in making the challenge or problem even worse. I'm finding ways to make it better. And then finally, my action, that I'm taking action. I'm laser focused on the priorities that matter, knowing when to delegate, especially things that are important and urgent, but they can be done by other resources and other people. And then letting go of the things that just don't matter. They're not priorities. They don't add up to what's really important. So I have to really use the priority matrix that Stephen Covey came up with many years ago. And that's what I've been using ever since. And
mm.
that's how I live my life and day. I have daily goals that I go through every day, and they roll up into weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annual goals.
Wow.
So you got to have systems, activities, processes. But if you don't prioritize correctly, then you're always going to have distractions that are going to take you off course. And then
Yeah.
finally, you got to learn. You got to know how to work on your business. No successful business person, especially that are doing a half a million to a million, if they want to get to the 2 million and above mark, are never going to do it if they're trying to do everything or more than what they should be doing. They should be focusing on the strategy of the business, what they're good at, and now learning to delegate to other people and trusting other people, whether if they're employees, alliance partners, whatever, resources to help them to do that. You can't scale to that level without making that transition.
That makes sense. I once heard somebody I was doing business with. He said, I thought the phrase was really interesting, where he and his brother were in a business and it was doing 3 million a month, and something changed, and it basically just the business stopped, literally, like
Mm,
3 million a month to nothing overnight, right? And
yeah.
so he was talking about how emotional he was, and like this end of the world and whatever. And his brother said, "Look, being hysterical isn't helping. Deal with the situation, not the emotion."
Yep.
I've never forgotten that, where he was saying, he's like, I get you're hysterical and I get that it's scary and I get this, you're panicking because, we went from 3 million to zero. He's like, but you can't deal with the emotion. That does nothing, but we can deal with the circumstance. So what you're saying, right? Deal with what you have control over. So you had mentioned earlier that growing up, coming from the household that you did, you ended up experiencing some limiting beliefs and some limiting, habits. And I would say most people experience that. It's part of being human. But I also would say a lot of people never get beyond that. So I guess first off, how did you even recognize you had them? And then two, how did you replace those with the habits and the systems you have today that allow you to experience the success you have?
Well, because I was always constantly operating in fear. I was constantly always operating from stress and anxiety, feeling overwhelmed and frustrated. Now, many people will say, well, that's, kind of normal, right? Most people do
Isn't
that
that
every
part of
day.
being an entrepreneur? That's like one of the jobs.
Yeah, exactly. And there's nothing wrong with that. You can't eliminate fear and you can't eliminate stress completely, but it's the difference between moderate levels and then higher extreme levels. So when I was operating constantly from anxiety I just knew it was in my body. I had aches and pains. I had back problems. I had problems sleeping. And all of these are things that were just signals and signs to let me know that the way I was going about handling the day to day running a business was not going to serve me. As a matter of fact, if I had kept going how I was going, I might have ended up passing away early like my father, because my father was that type of person that, stuffed things down. Like he did, even though like he was carrying this anchor, but he didn't let you know he had this anchor. He stuffed it, and then obviously it manifested itself into cancer. So those were the things that was my father's passing that was the catalyst for me that knew that I had to change something within me, because I kept on looking for the answers outside of myself, looking for the answers from somewhere else. So for me, I had to learn that if I was going to have a successful business, I had to improve myself. And it was not about being the best, it was about being my best. I had to learn to stop trying to be the best and showing up each day to be my best. There's a big
Wow.
difference, especially
That's,
when we talk about sustainability in business
yeah,
and success.
that is that phrase. It's not about being the best. It's about being your best.
Correct.
That's really interesting. Yeah, that's, so you started your business, you were going down the path that everyone was doing. And then you mentioned earlier that when you had your first, your son, your priorities shifted. Now, I think that's a pretty common for most people, but again, and I'm generalizing here. Most people will just keep working really hard, right? And then kind of regret later, but you did the opposite. You pivoted and made your son the priority. So I'm curious again, what was the evolution that led you to do that? And then how did you
Yeah.
sort of
Just to give you a little more context to the back of that story. I mean, I had, prior to that happening, I had walked away from another business that I had done very well in, and I made a lot of money. And as a result of that, I had some cushion, if you want to put
Sure.
it that way. Meaning that I had money that I wasn't just going to live on, but there was money I was able to put away and then put a certain amount, that I could, use and leverage in during that time when I had for my son, where my income now in my business was lower, but yet I was only going to be temporary, right? I wasn't going to be doing it for the rest of my life or the rest of my career. It was going to be just for a certain amount of time that I was doing that. So I did have the benefit of having some cushion, because throughout my entire life, I was always a saver, meaning that I always lived below my means. I've always put money away and put it to use to work for me, not me working for it. So I had that to fall back
Oh, that's nice. It's fun. I just actually posted something this morning actually where was talking about culture, American culture, and I said if America had a culture, it was we all spend. And I was talking so I worked in Hollywood for 15 years. I was a screenwriter, and I had a producer friend who, over the course of a decade, made $50 million
on.
cash
Wow.
in his pocket after taxes and agent fees. And about 4 years after that, he retired, and within 7 years, he was dead broke.
Wow.
And my brain was just kind of like, how do you? And I thought that was like, oh, that's just a Hollywood thing to do, right? But when I got into the marketing arena and I started working with some huge marketers making 7, 8, 10 million a year, and I got behind the scenes, I realized that they were all, they were making 8 million a year. And so everybody's like, my God, the guy's making 8, 10 million a year, but they were spending 8.5, right? Or 10.5. And it's just such an interesting phenomenon to me that so many people in America will, and a lot of these guys came from nothing, right?
Yeah.
Came from rural Appalachia, and you think, oh, they would. So anyway, when I meet someone who's like, I live below my means and save, that's so rare. So anyway, kudos to you. That's awesome. I was just a little bit of a tangent there from my because it's on top of my mind because I was writing about it today. But so when you work with someone, like what's the process you take someone? So I'm assuming so let's use me as an example. I got $1 million business. I come to you and I'm like, hey, Christopher, I've been stuck at $1 million for 3 years, and I really want to try to double or triple my business. What's the process you're going to take me through to help me figure out how to get there?
Okay. So first of all, we're going to have to work on you first before we get.
No.
Well, the reason is because a lot of times it's the business owner, believe it or not, that he or she will get in their own way of making that transition because they see it only from the way they see it. They can only see it how they envision it. What I teach business owners to understand is that you have to have more self-awareness and self-regulation to see things for what it is, not just how you think it should be. Once you're able to now change that way of thinking, you're going to be able to see things that maybe normally you're not used to, or maybe you wouldn't normally agree on, but now are open to new ideas. You're more likely now to give up the control you can't control. You're more likely to delegate things that you were not used to doing, because without now first learning how to do that, you're not going to be able to make those changes in the business. You're going to fight it, you're going to resist it, and you're going to go right back to the same old ways that you were doing that are keeping you still at the 500,000, 1 million mark instead of now growing. So we got to look at that. Number two, we got to look at your P&L. We got to look at, okay, what are are you trying to, let's look at what is your net profit margin? What is your revenue? Has the revenue shown any kind of progression at all? We have to look at the P&Ls, the P&L increasing. Is it in alignment or better than the industry average, depending upon the business that you're in? A lot of times you might be spending more money than you should in your COGS, the cost of goods sold, or, the expenses. So we look at that. I'll look at also their process, their operations. A lot of times they don't have the right systems, or not all the right systems and tools and resource is in place in order to scale. And if you're not systemized, it's going to be very hard to move to that next level. And again, I'm just kind of touching this on a macro level.
Of course.
But then, of course, everything is customized, and I break everything.
You're right. Yep. I get that.
Now, one of the things I do, Travis, that a lot of business coaches and mentors and strategists don't do, they don't realize how important this is. Many businesses, and this even goes for larger companies too, because I've seen this many, many times. They don't have, either one, they don't have a value proposition, or two, whatever they think is a value proposition is not truly in alignment with the audience they serve. Now, a lot of times I can go to a business owner and say, do you know your audience? Oh, yeah, I know my audience. We know them real well. I've been in this business for 10 years. Matter of fact, before I started this business, I spent 15, 20 years working for somebody else. I know this business inside and out. Okay. How about your employees? Oh yeah, they know it too. And then I'll do an assessment where I'll go out and I'll do an audience segmentation analysis. I'll talk to each of the people that are involved in the process, indirectly, directly involved in increasing revenue in the business. And 9 out of 10 times, it never fails, they're not in alignment. So they don't truly not understand the audience like they think. Their staff doesn't truly understand. So now you got certain people thinking this is the way to do it. This is the way to do it. The communication is not there. So this is why things are falling through the cracks, because the communication is based on assumptions and speculation. Thus why it's important, what I talked about earlier, the self-awareness and self-regulation for each business owner to learn how to think differently, to look at things for what it is, not what they think it should be, so that we can offset that. I shouldn't say eliminate completely. A value proposition is very important. If you don't understand truly who your audience is, what is the challenge that they have that could be better? What are the results they seek and don't have? Many just assume that, and they don't have actual data. They haven't done any research or done any study to determine. And just because how things were done 10 years ago, 15 years ago, is not going to be the same now. I had a moving company that came to me a few years ago. They had started their business in 1994, and they told me, here's our target audience. And I said, and they gave me the target audience. They said, yeah, we're targeting people in mid 20s to like early 30s. These are usually people that are moving from maybe, moving into their first apartment, condo, maybe from into a starter home if they just got married, and they use our moving services. And even though we're not on a national level like U-Haul or Penske, we that's who our audience is. And I looked at this and I said, when's the last time you updated this? And they said, we haven't. We've been doing this since 1994. I said, yeah, I was your audience back then. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I said, I was your audience. I'm a Gen X. I was back then, I was 27 years old. Yeah. I said, yeah, guess how old I am now? How old? I said, I'm 57. I said, you're still targeting a Gen X. The Gen Xers are in their late 40s to late 50s. That's not your audience. Your audience now are Gen Z and maybe, the younger side of the millennial. Your message is not aligning to that audience.
Yeah.
He was like shocked. And the thing about this, Travis, most businesses and even some of the ones that have been around for a while look great. They're making money, but they're not making the money they could be because they don't understand this.
Mm.
So, and the thing is, every business leads by features and benefits. Let me show you how I can make your life better. Let me show you how I can make your business better. That's not what's going to increase sales. It's the best companies are trusted advisors. They help the client to see the challenge that can be better for them. Sometimes that has nothing to do with your product in itself. That's what the trusted advisor part comes in. You got to help them to see what that challenge is that can be better. What are the results they seek and know have? That value proposition is got to now speak to that audience universally based upon a lot of factors. Personality type, could be multi-generational type, ethnic background. You got to factor all these things in to come up with the right messaging overall that is going to speak universally for that challenge that most of the people they serve want to be better and to the results they seek. When you can do that, and now that can be leveraged across their website in the upper fold, marketing collateral, across social media platforms in terms of their content or on the profile itself, when they're networking, when maybe they're on podcasts, or maybe they're speaking at industry B2B conferences, whatever. That message has got to be in alignment to that challenge that could be better to the results they seek. That will reduce the number of touch points on the buyer's journey to accelerate your sales and thus increase revenue and profit.
Wow.
So that's another area that, and a lot of PR agencies and marketing agencies don't understand that either. As a matter of fact, I've done a lot of work for those agencies for their clients because they didn't know how to do it.
It was interesting because I'm not going to name the scandal that's going on right now to date the podcast, but there's some stuff going on in Hollywood right now. It's all over. There's a huge scandal. But and everybody's focused on this one thing, but my viewpoint is like, again, I just wrote an article about this. I'm like, this is the biggest news to come out of the scandal, is that one of the people was paying a publicist $25,000 a month. And my comment was, just think if he had spent that money on a social media ghostwriter and a done for you YouTube channel. I'm all in a year. Do you know where that guy would, like, he wouldn't need Hollywood anymore because his brand would be so big. But in that system, that's just what they do.
Well, that's just it. If you don't have the right value proposition in alignment with your audience's true challenge that could be better in the results they seek, I don't care what lead gen, what SEO you're using. It's not that the lead gen is not good or the SEO is not good. It's because the SEO and the lead gen can only do what it can do based upon the message. And if the message is in alignment to that, then it's gonna be mediocre. And that's unfortunately what's going on in businesses across all industries. That message is so strategic, important, and that has got to be understood at the business owner level, and every role and duty or duties in that organization, no matter how big they are. Most organizations assume they understand each other's role and duties, but they truly don't.
So do you have any like secret sauce of how you help someone uncover a world-class, value proposition? because a lot of
Yes.
people talk about it, and yet there's still a lot of very mediocre. Uh,
Yeah, so for me, it's first you got to do an audience segmentation analysis. You got to really analyze their audience. You got to see what changes have taken place. I want to look at first maybe some just general data, like look at some data that's happening in that industry, and then go out and it doesn't mean you have to go out and spend a ton of money for a professional marketing research company to go do that, but you got to get some feedback. You got to get some information, and then even right down to even personality types. That doesn't mean every person that your audience is going to have the same personality type, but overall, I know for me, since I'm dealing with business owners, most of them are going to have type A personalities. Okay. They're on the disc profile. A lot of them are going to be task oriented, meaning they're going to be D's. They're going to be dominant. They're going to identify with what if questions. But if I'm asking them how to questions and why to questions and who questions, they're going to look at me and say, who the hell are you talking to? Get out of my way. You can't help me. But if I'm going, what if this could be better? And if you did that, and this, it can get you those results. See, D's want results. They don't want the details along with it. Show me how to get it done. That's it. But you'd be amazed a lot of times the messages, if other people that be targeting that type of audience are not speaking that language.
Wow, I love it. You said something a minute ago. I think it just reminded me of a conversation I heard one time where you were talking about the first thing you got to do is you've got to work with the business owner to kind of get out of their own way. And I had a client of mine, he's now a good friend, had a chance to go to Necker Island and hang out with Richard Branson. I think there was 10 people, right? And they were at dinner, and he was at the table, and he managed to be able to sit right next to Richard Branson, and he he's doing an 8-figure business, and he said he was talking to him, and he said, Mr. Branson, I got a question for you. Like, here's my business, this is what I'm doing. Like, what do I need to do to build $1 billion business? And he said, he's like, I'll never forget about it. Richard Branson just looked at me and he said, you need to get rid of all of your bad millionaire habits, because that's what's keeping you stuck.
Yeah, he's exactly right. Your habits will either make or break you. And when we say habits, it's not just personal habits are going to be the big part, yes,
Sure.
but it's also you're this doing the same old. This is why you ever see a company and they'll send, let's say they have 100 salespeople and they'll send them all to a 2-3 day sales training and spend $100,000 for the training. Let's just use that math, and they're like, wow, what, this was a great training, and everyone's all pumped up, and then 3-4 days later, what ends up happening? People default right back to the same old way, the way they were doing things. Nothing has changed because there's no accountability. And this is why these things, because again, there's the habits are still, they haven't addressed the habits. They haven't even addressed the emotional intelligence side of it. This is why the 80-20 rule, it usually stands true. You're always going to have the 20% of your sales force that's going to produce 80% of the results, and 80% of the sales force is going to produce less than 20, because there's a difference in the level of confidence. If
Mm.
you work on the foundation more with those people, not teaching them sales one-on-one and how to do a discovery call and how to sell features and benefits, but get them to work on their own state of being, that they can learn to vibrate at a higher energy, learn how to ask more questions, learn how to communicate more effectively with active listening. These are the things they don't teach in these things. And then
Yeah.
if you don't have the accountability, it's like with anything. Yes, it could take 3 weeks to form a habit, but it takes 6 months or more before it's embedded at the subconscious level. The reason why a lot of these things don't take hold is because there's no accountability, and they don't want to take the time. We don't have that time. Well, I
Yeah.
guess you're not going to have the time to still be making $500,000 or $1 million for the next 5 or 6 years, 10 years.
Yeah.
But if you make the commitment over a year, maybe in the second, third year, you're gonna now go from 1 million to 4 or 5 million or 6 million or 10 million.
Yeah.
But if you're not doing it, maybe your competitor will. And what are you going to do now? So it starts here. It's how we think. It's and it's, I call it the foundation. I call it the 4 pillars of success: foundation, emotional intelligence, how we think, preparation, number two. If you don't prepare and break down goals, not many of the goals I see out there are very vague. There's a lot of wants and needs. Those are two words that always get you caught up in the control you can't control. I don't even have those words in my vocabulary, but a lot of people use it thousands of times a day. Execution. You got to execute on everything that you have a foundation for and you prepared, and then you got to measure. Some people say they're measuring, but I don't truly think they're measuring to the level they should be, and they don't have. Maybe they're not even using the right KPIs. And so these are the things that I in any business I make sure that we use the four pillars of success and
Mm.
customize that to each and every business that I work with,
No, I love it.
individually, team, and then overall as a business collectively at all three levels.
Well, this has been fantastic. So before we wind things up here, I'm like, let's talk a little bit about your company, Empowered Fathers in Action. It's
Yeah.
just such a fantastic name for a company, Empowered Fathers in Action Inc. So what was the sort of the genesis of that, and how did that come about?
Yeah, well, I know you and I had talked offline about that. I mean, for me, it was a life changing moment I had with my father. About well, actually, it was just over 25 years ago now. My father passed away on December 30th of 1999 from cancer.
Mhm.
He was 56 years old. I'm 57 now, so I'm a year older than he was when he
Wow.
had passed. And, my dad and I did not have a great relationship, when I was growing up. He was often busy working, he was a workaholic. My dad grew up poor. He wanted to be very successful, and he sacrificed a lot to do that. He sacrificed his family. So I would not, I would go like 2 or 3 months without seeing my father.
Wow.
And as a boy, that has an effect. When you're out there on the baseball field and you strike somebody out, you hit a home run, and you look in the stands, and your dad's not there. And other dads from the kids I had on my team, they were there. So that was kind of hard. So I grew up, always with this strong need for validation. I had a low self-esteem as a result of it. Now I'm not blaming my father. I mean, it is again, it was just I was a product of what happened. What
Sure.
is. Now my dad, when he was dying, it was the day before he died. We had this moment where I was at his bedside, and he was on morphine at the time. And I remember him looking over at me. He couldn't talk. His eyes were half open, half shut, but he was communicating to me. I don't know how. No words were being said on his part, but he was speaking to me, and yet I could hear it. I can't explain it to this day, but
Mm.
I could hear what he was saying. And he wanted, I guess this was his way of saying goodbye and saying, I just wanted to let you know I've always loved you. I've always loved your brother, and I loved your mother. My parents had gotten divorced. And they've been divorced for a while. He goes, I know it didn't seem that way, but I did the best I could for what I knew. And then I realized, like, something clicked in me, and I said, my dad was always the black sheep of the family. My grandfather treated him like garbage. He always said he would amount to nothing. And then I began to think my dad was just a product of his upbringing. How could he be the father that I aspired to be when he didn't know how to?
Mm.
And that was the flip of the switch that went off for me, where I went from being a victim, being angry every day of my life, always pointing the finger at everybody else, using excuses and that type of thing, complaining, gossiping. And I said, I'm going to take responsibility. So no matter what deck of cards that you've been dealt, as an adult, it's your responsibility to do whatever you have to do with it to make it better. I didn't
Wow.
know how I was going to do it, but I did. And I've been on this journey now for almost 25 years, basically at this
Mm.
point, 25 years doing this. And I've never looked back. Was it easy? No. But the hardest thing you're ever going to do in your life is work on yourself. And as a business owner, if you're not working on yourself, then your business in itself is not going to be able to sustain or get to the level you would like to without it. I'm a firm
Yeah.
believer.
Yeah.
Yes, you could still do well, you could still, but it's not long term. And Richard Branson would even tell you that, because he worked on himself and he
Sure.
had success in many different businesses. So
Yeah.
with that being said, that's what inspired me to start Empowered Fathers in Action, to help families, to help dads, and then help them, to help develop future leaders. So that these kids, when they become adults, can become future leaders in their homes, their communities, and their businesses.
I love it. So if somebody's listening to this episode and they're resonating with what you're saying and they're like, my gosh, that's what I need in my life. How do they find you? How do they work with you?
Well, the best place, you can always find me on LinkedIn at Christopher Salem. I do have two websites, sustainablesuccess.net. That's my business strategy acceleration uh, business site. I also am a professional keynote speaker, breakout speaker. So you could go to my subject matter expert website, ChristopherSalem.com. But just reach out to me by email, chris@christophersalem.com, or chris@sustainablesuccess.net. Either one is fine. I'd love to meet people, get to know them. It's about the relationship. And, you have to build rapport and trust before you decide where it goes from there.
Yeah. Well, Christopher, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Travis, for having me.
Yeah. Cheers.